Good evening and welcome to the November meeting of the Amherst Municipal Affording Housing Trust Fund. We have important items on our agenda today, but like to welcome our membership here. Greg, thank you always for coordinating. Alex Cox, Allegra Clark, Rob Allingham, Carla Rash, Hee Jae Kim, and Paul Bockelman, of course. We actually want to start our meeting today and give attention to a significant thing going on in Amherst. As you all know, there has been a terrible fire that has displaced a lot of students, and we would like to say a couple things about that. Maybe Paul, since you've been kind of in the managing of this situation since the weekend, would you like to just share some general comments?
Sure, and people should weigh in on, they probably have information I don't have, so I just have from one perspective. 236 beds in that building that were the people who lived there. 230 of them were students at the university, mostly undergraduate, probably 2/3, 3/5, whatever, uh, were universities affiliates. The others, I think, were other colleges or maybe building management. Um, you know, and so they left their apartments when asked to because of the fire next door, and they never got to go back in. They lost everything. So it's really tragic. Their lives turned upside down, and just really feel for the students who lost their homes and everything they had. And it's, the stories are tragic, passports, visas, musical instruments they've had since children, pets, all kinds of things. So, but, the the headline is no one was injured, no one was hurt for the residents or for any of our first responders. The fire department arrived, as did multiple other fire departments. There were numerous firefighters and support on scene very quickly. And Eventually the fire got too far ahead and they had to demolish the building. So those units are off, those 236 beds are gone. And the construction next door that was building a similar size construction, which had gone up to about 5 stories already, and that's offline as well. So it's a pretty significant impact on the town. In terms of the students, I think they are, the university stepped up, had a lot of resources available to them in terms of a resource center. They had housing fairs yesterday and today, invited landlords from all over the region to come in and see what they had to offer. The university had medical, legal, academic, food, shelter resources available, and emotional support services available to the students. So we're fortunate in a way that they were all students, and the university was able to fill that need. Um, Nobody knows the cause. That's going to be under investigation. Those things usually take months to do, but the state fire marshal and state police are in charge of that investigation. Um, and it's still it's a pile of rubble now. So that's where we are.
Thanks for that update. Allegra?
Um, Thank you, Paul, for that. And I'm so grateful that nobody was injured, nobody died. That's really impressive given the magnitude of the fire. And I also just want to put it in the context of about 2 months prior, there was a fire at Olympia Oaks, which is just down the same road. So I know that there's been some stirring up of some of the feelings of seeing that fire 2 months ago for other community members. And, I'm very grateful that it didn't spread further than it did and impact them even further, because I know that 3 affordable units were lost in that fire as well. But I did see, and just wanted to share as a resource, that I believe both the Boulders and Meadowview apartments on East Hadley Road are waiving fees and security deposits for anyone who's impacted by the fire. I don't know how many units they might have available at this point, but that is a resource that might be available for some students. And I did see The other day I'd also seen, I believe Aspen Heights was offering a similar deal, but I don't know if if their unit was filled, because I think they only had one unit available that they were able to offer. But again, Amherst Innovative Living, who was the property management, has been doing hard work trying to get people placed, from my understanding, and also has been in communication with the students about returning security deposits and the month's rent, so that there will be that financial resource available for them. As we know, there's limited housing available as is. So it's important that we can do what we can as a community to help rehouse these students. So, and I hope that if there's any sort of concern around, not saying that this would happen, but sometimes it does after a tragedy like this, if there's any sort of like price gouging that's going on, that there would be a way to report that. And I don't know if there's a mechanism for that, but that's just something I wanted to bring to attention. I mean, it sounds from what I've seen so far that the community is really rallying, and that hasn't been reported as of yet, but it is something that I think, I hope the town would have some sort of mechanism for reporting.
Yeah, we certainly should be alert to that. It's a really good point. Yeah.
Thank you. And, as you all know, one of our members is at UMass. Alex, I wonder what you can share from where you sit.
Yeah, so thank you, Sir Bockelman and Allegra, for those updates. I know the university has a lot of resources, which you all both referenced, that they're mobilizing for this, notably the Student Care and Emergency Fund, which is an existing fund that students can apply to receive grants to cover hardship. But they have waived part of their normal processes so that any donations collected now are automatically directed to people who are seeking housing because of this fire. So there have also been collections of material goods, used clothing, and food on campus as well. And I know that there's been partnership with the Survival Center to facilitate some of that as well.
Excellent. Well, these tragedies bring out the best in a community, and I'm trying to see if we can put up some students here as next door to me as well. All right. Well, let's get into our posted agenda. We have a happy first item on our agenda, which is picking back up a conversation we've had with the Interfaith Faith Housing of Amherst, which wound up its operations and very generously decided to bequest us their funds. But let me go ahead and introduce Robert to tell us a little more and kind of report the great news formally.
Great. So my name is Robert Ryan. I'm the chair of the Interfaith Housing of Amherst, Inc. It's been around for quite a long time. They started when Village Park was developed, and used the proceeds for that to continue to promote affordable housing in Amherst. We've donated to lots of different projects, including Olympia Oaks, to the Northampton Road project that's over by Amherst College, and other projects in town. So we sort of decided as a group to spend down our funds rather than to continue to do fundraising, et cetera. So we voted to give our balance to Amherst, Municipal Housing Trust, to you all. After, of course, paying our closing fees, we had to close the nonprofit down. That's what we're doing. So our last two acts, is to give you all a check for $36,000. And then for you to receive that check, sign affidavit that you got the money, and then Interfaith will, our lawyer will submit paperwork to the state to finalize the closure of Interfaith. And so, it's up to you to how you decide to spend that money. Of course, your charge is affordable housing in Amherst, so we know you'll do a good job with it as well. And we've got a board, and so I didn't list them all in the chat or anything, but I can send you when I deliver the check. I'll list the board members who are members of it. Jim Lumley is our treasurer, so he's the one who writes the checks for the organization. Sarah Marshall's on our board, who you might know. Rebecca Fricka is on the board, and some others.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. It's we're grateful for the funds. We will invest them wisely, and because of the fact that they're not Community Preservation Act funds, we do have a little more flexibility. So let's see if we can bring a greater multiplier of impact with that flexibility. So thank you so much, and we'll connect in front of the town shortly to do a photo op with you.
That'd be great. Yeah, I want to schedule a time to meet with you and Paul or whoever to deliver the check and get this moving. So you have the funds and we can close up.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us, Robert, and again for thinking of us and following through.
Great. Thanks.
All right.
right.
Thanks,
you all.
Robert. And please be in touch.
Okay, I will. Great.
All right.
Good to see you all. Thanks.
Good night.
Night.
All right. Well, so we're now ready to move into the main agenda item this evening, which is to have a presentation from the Amherst Community Land Trust. We have met with the land trust several times already, but their project is ramping up and taking shape. They have a proposal before the Community Preservation Act Committee, as does the trust. We'll both be answering questions in the same evening in a couple of weeks. And I'm speaking for myself, I'm enthusiastic about the project. As you all know, we received money in lieu of 3 affordable units in town, and the prospect of affordable home ownership in the center of downtown is a very exciting prospect. And we would like to know more about the project. And this is really an opportunity for all of the membership to get your head around it. Want to make sure that everyone here understands what the land trust is proposing, and I would like you to ask the questions that are on your mind. So this is an opportunity for us to get up to speed and get this project squarely in our brains. So with that, reintroduce Linda Slakey, who is the is it chair or president? What's your title, Linda?
I'm the president of the board.
President of the board, and chief volunteer, putting in her time to see how this project can be assembled with the resources that it's going to take, which are not inconsiderable. So I'll give you the floor. Have we decided to have you present your slides or us? What's the best idea, Greg?
I'm happy to present. I think that was Linda's preference. And just one more question, Linda. Logistically, shall I promote anybody else to a panelist role right now? I see a couple of your colleagues, Jim and Maura, in the audience. Anybody else on the docket tonight?
I'm not sure how many will finally show up. I told them that we weren't right first on the agenda, and they probably had until 7:15 to appear. But Gaston, when we spoke earlier this afternoon, you encouraged me to allow questions as we went along. That argues in favor of letting the other ACLT, especially Jim, have panelist status. They're good on some of the particular questions that might arise.
Right. So I have Jim and Maura are here, so I'll promote both of them right now, and
okay,
and you all can.
And so what did we decide about the slides?
And I'm happy to do the slides.
Okay, all right. So Greg will share the slides. Linda, just tell us when to advance.
okay.
Welcome, Jim. Thank you for being here. Maura, pleased to have you joining us and helping us out here.
So one of my reasons for thinking that it would be better to have Greg show the slides than to share screen myself is that lets me be able to see all the other participants. And I really would encourage you as we go along to raise your hand, and we'll try to keep up with questions as we go. I'm not sure how much total time you're imagining here, Gaston. If the question should happen to lead to a particularly robust discussion, sort of call time on us in time that we do get to showing the financial aspects at the end.
I expect we're going to be with you at at least till 8 p.m. So we're going to give this project ample time. It is a significant opportunity, and you're asking for very significant funds from the trust. So we really need to understand it. This is a situation where our legitimacy as people charged with taking care of these funds and advancing the mission is at its sharpest. So we got to understand this, and so give it the time it takes.
Okay, so I'm going to begin at the very beginning here. So forgive me if you're very familiar with this, but I know that the current membership of the trust, some of you are new to it, and this isn't necessarily something you're thinking about all the time. So just so it's in people's minds as we go along, let me just remind you the fundamental model that's going to apply to all the things I say about this development, which is our basic model is that we raise funds in the interests of owning land. And that means that when lower moderate income homeowners are looking to buy a home, they literally only have to pay for the cost of the home. Our relationship with our homeowners is governed by a ground lease that we both sign. The lease is for 99 years, which is in effect perpetual agreement. And there are two primary conditions of the lease, as well as a lot of detail that you don't need to think about. They agreed to occupy the home. So if their plans change at a future time and they want to live elsewhere or need to live elsewhere, they can't run this property as a rental from afar. They have to sell it back to the trust, and we sell it on then to another family. And the other key agreement is that at the time of resale, the value can have grown only as rapidly as incomes grow, not with whatever market forces are driving up the costs of housing. So basically, once a house belongs to us, it's affordable at the level that it's affordable the day we settle with the first buyer in perpetuity. So you can go on to the next slide there, Greg. So an easy reminder here of the particular property we're talking about tonight. It's 174 Amity Street. If you've ever had occasion to walk down Amity Street from the cinema on that side, you've probably seen this house. Part of its history is that it has been rented over many years now, typically to groups of artists and musicians. And at one point in which there was an artist there that specialized in big outdoor wooden sculptures, the house itself collected quite a set of those sculptures. And that artist has agreed to allow that big bird sculpture that's a hallmark of the end that faces the street to stay with the project going forward. And then it's not so obvious from the street, but the property is quite extensive. The existing building goes back. So that's the other frame is a picture taken from the back corner of the property to give you a sense of the whole envelope of the existing building. And then the next slide, I think, shows sort of what ACLT's vision is for 174 Amity Street. And again, we've talked about this in previous visits, but just again, so everybody has it at the top of their mind, this is going to produce a cluster development right in the middle of the town. The existing building is a historic family residence. And when the project is finished, because there's sufficient land to add an additional structure, even with a little wetland in the corner, it will yield a cluster of 5 low to moderate income families. Everybody still with me? I'm about to move on to some newer material here that you might not have heard before. Okay. So since the last time we spoke, Bruce Coldham has done conceptual interior designs. By conceptual, I mean not only that it suggests a concept, but this is the plan based on which we've done a much more detailed costing than we were able to do before. The numbers that I talked about in earlier or put into various proposals earlier were based on a square footage estimate of what it costs to upgrade a building of this age. Now we really have cost estimates which say, okay, so many new doors, so many new windows, etc. So the level of detail that's available is greatly more precise now that we have the interior concept. And just to walk you through this concept, the arrows that have, there's some unreadable text at the top that you don't need to worry about. What it does is explain that those arrows point to two locations, which because of the way the vertical studs run in the house, and because the house is old enough that those studs were much bigger lumber than would be now, that creates two places where it's easy to put a code compliant fire resistant wall. So those will be the primary divisions that make it legitimate to offer these as separate units for home ownership rather than running it as an apartment setting. And they change a little bit, kind of the way the interior space is used compared to the way it's used before. So the largest rectangle there is the original house, and then the two pieces that were added later have a smaller footprint on the ground. So what's currently the main front door will now lead to unit 1, and the second porch entry will lead to unit 2, and unit 3 will have a new exterior front door built. The other thing to just notice across the board is that all the units are laid out so there's a half bath on the first floor, a fairly large common room. And one of the efforts that went into this design is that two rather grand rooms in the original old house are now respectively the common area or living room, living dining in some cases, of unit 1 and unit 2. Those are quite beautiful rooms. They each have pressed tin ceilings that look like they were just put up last week. And they're really some nice architectural details. So some of the interior design, or much of the interior design, was an effort to balance as much retention of the graciousness of the existing structure as we could, and still make efficient use of the total square footage. So that led to sort of design concept in which every unit has a big living room, in some cases, which doubles for a dining area, depending on how much space that left for a kitchen. And then a full kitchen, a washer and dryer in the unit, and a half bath on the first floor, and then a stairwell to the second floor. So the second floor layouts are on the next slide, right?
Okay, next slide. And I want to remind the membership, do not be shy. If you have questions about what we're talking about, please ask them now so that we can be right on topic.
Yeah, I asked for Greg to show the slides specifically so I could continue to see everybody. So I'll see if you put your hand up, especially if you put up the yellow Zoom hand, which will catch my attention. So the first and second unit, again, to sort of maximize keeping the original room layout as much as possible, have a somewhat unconventional way of providing for individual bedrooms. So in those big rooms on the second floor, there's a floor-to-ceiling room divider at the back that allows for private sleeping spaces, but there's a common area shared with the two people who sleep in those spaces. The presupposition being those would be children or young people's rooms, at least initially. If a family chose to, they could eventually close them off individually. But that's the plan that we're thinking is the best way, as I say, to retain the graceful features of the house going forward. And then there's a principal bedroom on each of those, in each of those units as well. And then the third unit is a little bit different. Again, a principal bedroom and then two smaller ones that are fully enclosed. EJ, did you have a question?
I did, thanks. Just on that note about potentially closing off rooms and kind of following up on the thought, just wanted to clarify, do the owners of the homes, do they have the rights to modify the home in the way they see it? And would that affect any sort of future resales if like the house goes back to being sold and things like that? Is there oversight that the ACLT is intending to apply here, basically?
It's a good question. In every case that we have now are single family homes, and the ground lease reads that they need our permission to add any permanent structures to the land. I mean, it's based on the fact that we retain ownership of the land. So they'd need our permission to build a garage or put in an in-ground pool or something like that. Even to build a fence if it has cement fence post, you know, if it's a permanent structure on the land. We haven't restricted what happens on the inside. But I see Jim's hand up, which is typically a signal that he wants to share something about how we interact around the interior of the house that he knows better than I do. Jim, do you want to respond to how we would deal with changes on the inside?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I think I wasn't going to say anything different from what you were saying. I just wanted to acknowledge that I'm available. So because there were two pieces to the question. The homeowners have freedom to decorate or modify the inside, but to the price question, they would have to get permission to have those modifications can make any kind of change in the resale right. And in fact, here where we would be working with public funding and it would be it would have to be something that was allowable under the state, the housing and livable communities rules for under their deed restrictions. So it would be pretty limited, any ability to impact the price, but they could make decorations and so on. And as Linda says, any changes to the exterior of the building or additional buildings, any changes in size are all require permission as well.
Bob, did you have a question as well?
I think I figured it out. I was just wondering where the stairs were for unit 2 and unit 3, but I think I can kind of figure it out from where it is.
They were drawn in explicitly in unit 1. I noticed the same thing myself. I wondered if that question would come up. There's two what look like empty spaces in those other units. The stairwell and this stairwell. That funny little quirky space outside the two smaller bedrooms in unit 3. Yeah. So we're ready to
Next slide.
move on here. Since the last time we spoke, we've been moving along at a fair pace, given the inherent delays that sometimes develop in this kind of work on the pre-development phase. We've done the wetlands assessment. We've had a formal survey. I showed you the concept designs for units 1 to 3, and that in turn allowed a much more precise estimate of construction costs for units 1 to 3. In several previous conversations, I've talked about us negotiating with Habitat to be the construction partner for the new units. That's now moved on to a signed MOU. And Megan McDonough of Habitat has been a member of the working group, not from the very beginning, but for several months now. And we've just recently hired a civil and environmental engineer who's taking the site plan again in a more formal direction toward approvals. He's doing the planning for stormwater management, various technical issues that we'll need to have in place before we go forward for approval of the site plan. And there's a list of things that are in process at the moment. They're on the next slide. So we've approached the Conservation Commission informally, somewhat the same way we've had conversations with you. We asked for conversations in which we could discuss the concept and get their advice. With the Conservation Commission, they've encouraged us to come forward with the site plan that I've been showing on these slides. And if you look at the sort of dotted line that circles around the wetland, the odd little shape at the bottom right corner there is an identified wetland, and those are its boundaries. And the 50-foot boundary is clearly shown, and then the 100-foot boundary is sketched in there. It's of course encroached on by the existing structure, which that is acceptable. The specific question was, could we allow the duplex to encroach on the 100-foot boundary? That's a key question. It would have to move very close to the street to clear the 100-foot boundary. We were encouraged to bring this design forward. They made very clear that they were very unlikely to accept encroachment on the 50-foot boundary, but that they would entertain a proposal that encroached on the 100-foot boundary, and with the warning that they might ask for some level of mitigation. That kind of mitigation typically takes the form of plantings and various things. So that's the basis of our conversation with the Conservation Commission. Bucky Sparkle, who is the civil and environmental engineer that we're working with, says he's close to being able to actually ask for a session in which we put this plan forward to the Conservation Commission for formal approval. The phase 1 environmental assessment is going on in parallel, and the application to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is required for the 2 to 3 unit conversion, and to the Planning Board for adding the duplex to the site. We're close to being ready to mount those formally. They also have had a couple of rounds of informal conversation with Nate Malloy, and we've been going back and forth with multiple versions of the site design, and we seem to have honed in on one that he was comfortable encouraging us to take a particular route with. And we had a nice windfall as the subject of careful research, and yet another citizen of Amherst coming forward to help us on a volunteer basis. It turns out there's a recent precedent for exactly what we're going to ask the Planning Board for, right in this neighborhood on North Prospect Street. There's a property that I think 4 or 5 years ago had an existing duplex and wanted to build a 3-unit townhouse, and the lot behind, and that was approved, and it was so exactly a comparable situation to this one that gave us a lot of confidence that this was probably going to be something that both the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board would be happy with. Of course, it's an added plus for our project that all the units will be affordable. And also it's a plus from our point of view that this is on Amity Street, not on one of the more purely residential streets. So there won't be arguments about increased density adding to the traffic, for example. Be hard to add to the traffic on Amity Street by adding a couple more families. Any questions at this stage? I see you nodding, Alex. I know this is your field of study, so you probably would have asked some of these questions if I hadn't said we were already. And maybe you'll still have more to ask us about. Greg?
Yes, I'm just curious who's doing the phase 1.
Who is doing the phase 1? I don't remember. Deborah Gross is managing the phase 1. The property still belongs to the Gross family.
So she has to do it.
Steps that Deborah has to order the work, basically.
Got it.
And I don't remember what firm she's going with. That is in process, but I don't remember the firm she hired.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we're ready for the next slide. So now, switching gears here to what is this all going to cost? So maybe if there are other questions you have in mind about the project itself before I launch into the money, you might want to ask them. But we're also happy to take up conversation about the project itself later. Alex?
Yeah, thank you. This is a question about the terms of the ground lease. I noticed in the materials you provided in our packet, and thank you for those. You mentioned that one of the existing tenants with another ACLT property has housemates. And I also understand you have this owner occupancy requirement. So if the owner has extra bedrooms that they're looking to fill and pursue like a co-housing arrangement with somebody, is that something that you all are open to? And do you have precedent for essentially setting rents or shares of a mortgage in that case?
Yeah, but the underlying principle, and we spent a lot of time with this when we first formed, is that an ACLT homeowner should be able to presume that they have all the rights and privileges that any homeowner would have. So if they have a spare bedroom, they can have a student as a housemate or whatever might be the arrangement. So we don't attempt to police that. Right now, we're small enough that we tend to know what's going on in most of our families because we cultivate a sense of community. The particular case that we mentioned, the homeowner is a widower. He has lived alone in that home for several years. And he's also very community minded. And by that, I mean, he's very explicit about the fact that he's part of ACLT because it exists to promote community. And he does that in a number of ways in his own life. And that includes, since he doesn't need all the space and he likes the land he's on and doesn't feel inclined to move, it was a very natural step in his life to invite housemates. Yeah.
But then I guess I'm still curious about the question. Do you scrutinize the rents that are charged housemates? Because those could be at full market, right? You could rent the bedroom for $1,500.
Yeah. I happen to know that the rents in the particular house I was just discussing are well below market. But that question has been a matter of debate in ACLT from the very beginning. And there hasn't been a case that was so obvious that it would prompt us to sort of force the issue and come to a decision. The 2 points of view that tend to prevail when we iteratively over the years have several times brought it up for discussion. One is that we probably ought to constrain people to make the rents affordable since they're in the house on an affordable basis. The alternate point of view is this is their house and they're low income people. And if rip-off landlords are charging high rates, we should prevent them from improving their circumstances. And besides, how would we police it? If we made it a requirement, how are we going to check that? Are we going to be that involved in people's lives? So issues that are that thorny in the history of ACLT tend to maintain a status of being subject to discussion until the day comes when some case forces us to have a policy. And that day hasn't come for restraining the rents. Jim, do you want to expand on that thought?
Yeah, I do want to expand a little bit. So it absolutely everything that Linda has said is, reflects the complexity of the issue and the way the organization has dealt with it. I will say that so we did actually have a discussion. There's two different distinctions though. When we've had that discussion, it's been both about the possibility of someone having a separate rental unit and versus also the situation that you were describing, which is just an extra room. And currently the leases do allow the homeowner to have other people in the home, and they're silent. So in other words, the homeowner is free to charge the rents that they have. And it, as Linda says, it's something that we've agreed to continue to go back to, but currently someone could come in, bring someone in, and they negotiate. We don't get involved in the negotiations around what price they charge. And part of the theory, part of the reason there's a distinction between those two is the theory is when you're living, when you make the choice to live with people in shared space and shared rooms, it really is more of a, we see it more as that's your chosen people, your chosen family, however you want to talk about it. And at that point, getting involved with why, why you chose, that's a personal relationship that we prefer not to get involved in. If it's a purely commercial relationship where you have a separate rental unit, I think that ACLT is more likely to come back and revisit it and think about whether or not you're going to have, we would put limits on it. That's my understanding of where we are, and that certainly is we don't have any units that have a second unit to rent out, and currently that's what's allowed for the homeowners.
Thank you, Lyndon. Jim, Alex, do you have any follow-ups on that? No? Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
excellent. Allegra?
So my question's more around possible owner selection. And just thinking about the fact that there is already a affordable home ownership development under construction in Amherst that does have a pretty, I think, strenuous screening and, building process going on in terms of credit counseling, making sure people can get pre-approved for mortgages and all of that. And I just was wondering, since it seems that if this project comes to fruition, it will happen a little bit after Amherst Community Homes anticipates getting people into their units, if there would be any chance that there would be some homeowner potential families from that lottery left over that you could then tap into. Is that something that you and Valley have been in communication about?
We haven't had any formal communication about it. It certainly has crossed my mind to hope that it would simplify our search for homeowners, that there would be a pool that was already very aware of the whole review process, and unfortunately disappointed in not making the lottery for the North Amherst homes. So it hasn't risen to the top of the to-do list yet to have an active conversation about that. Before I did that, we will be following Housing and Livable Communities rules about the lottery. So the first thing would be to talk to them about, are there any conditions in which there'd be a preferred pool by virtue of having recently applied. I don't know, we'll have to schedule those conversations as we get closer to homeowner selection.
And just, can I follow up? Is there, because I know there was a lot of conversation around local preference with that lottery, is the community land trust model, is there any sort of preference or history of having local, either people who are already living in Amherst or people who are affiliated with the schools, whether it's their kids or working at the schools, the universities, or...
It's certainly part of our philosophy that we intend to be housing the Amherst workforce. The tricky thing about actually framing that is that a lot of the Amherst workforce doesn't live in Amherst. That's the population we'd like to serve. We'd like to make it possible to live in Amherst if you work in Amherst. And so far we've marketed, obviously according to Housing and Livable Communities rules, but also with a lot of personal outreach to places where we thought there might be. For example, at one stage we invited what's it called? It's not the Better Business Bureau, the Amherst downtown business folks, to just make their membership aware that we were going to make houses available that would be kind of within the means of their workforce. I don't know whether that actually led to any particular applicants or not. It's tricky trying to have a preference. We've so far just resorted to personal outreach during the marketing phase to try to make populations aware of the possibility.
Thank you.
Greg, I'm not keeping track of whose hands went up in what order.
Yeah.
Are you keeping track, or Gusto?
Zoom does it for us. He did.
You do.
Didn't realize that Zoom does that for us. That's awesome. Linda, this might be it might be slightly beyond this project specifically. Maybe it's more about the ACLT in general. So I assume this is going to be a model that's going to apply for not just this project, but other similar projects.
Mhm.
And long term, it's basically a model that requires ACLT support to maintain the land and then have oversight over the land and stuff like that. I don't recall if there was any sort of presentation on the ACLT models for how they intend to fund the overall long-term support of these properties. Is that something you can get into?
Jim, what do we say about that in the ground lease?
Yeah, I guess the question I would have is what there's a need for a minimal there's a minimal cost of maintaining the organization to maintain the stewardship responsibilities, but it's currently we're largely doing it with volunteer help. As the organization grows, we have the ground lease fees is one form of paid for by the homeowners, pay ground lease fees to us. In general, the model is designed so that once we put our subsidies in the home, the resale remains affordable. So the costs are relatively minimal, but there is some, and there isn't cost for the homeowners maintain their properties for the most part. I mean, there's always slippage in these things, right? But in general, the homeowners are maintaining their homes. There's room at resale to pass the subsidy on to the next homeowner. The presumption of ACLT as a nonprofit is we'll always be doing some fundraising, but we won't be having to come back. But again, it's fundraising for special things like we've talked about developing a reserve that could function as a loan fund or perhaps even matching grants for rehab to incentivize rehab. So there are things that as we grow and become more robust as a nonprofit, we can supplement what we're doing. But the model is really designed so that we make the home affordable for the homeowners so that then they can get in it and they can actually repair it and manage the home itself. Um, just like any other homeowner, and then that subsidy we've already got in there, we just keep it. So it's our job is to maintain the organization so that we can oversee that. But I will mention that all our homes also have deed restrictions held by either the Housing and Livable Communities or the town, so that there's backup in that worst case scenario that we don't expect will happen of ACLT disappearing.
Thank you.
And I would add to that one of the standing committees of ACLT is the homeowner support group. For example, one of our homeowners wants to add a second bathroom, and they are eligible for a particular state-funded low-cost loan program to do that. And the application was onerous, and the family had some difficulties, illnesses, and slowed them down. And one of the members of the homeowner support group has been literally sitting with the family member that's responsible for trying to pull this together, just being present, saying, this form, do this here, it'll be okay, We take a pretty hands-on approach to supporting any homeowner that asks for it. Others of our homeowners are just, we say, how are things going? They say, fine, we aren't intrusive. You know, things could be going badly and we wouldn't know it. But if people ask for help, we step up in very positive ways. Whose turn is it? Gaston, I think it might be.
Yes, no, I mean, we can follow from the top left, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Linda, I apologize if this is asking you to repeat something you said at an earlier meeting, because I vaguely remember you touching on this. But I know that Habitat has fairly high standards for energy efficiency in their projects, but that you all are working in an existing structure with the conversion. Can you speak a little bit to the utilities? Is it all electric? Is it on gas right now? And is there any plan to change that as part of this project?
Yeah, the main house has fuel oil, as fuel oil based heating. The overall, I wish Seth was here. I'm going to buck that question to Seth and get back to you, but I will say what he has said in conversations about the particular plans that he suggests for upgrading the house. He said, this isn't going to get to the R value that a Habitat house has, but it's going to end up much better than it is now. I know one specific thing he plans to do because Wright Builders has already done it in one of our other houses. Houses in this neighborhood, all without exception, have problems with water in the basements. The water table is very high, and depending on how well they've managed diverting water from the gutters well away from the edge of the house, there are all kinds of things that can make trouble. So I'm told this the best practice now for dealing with that kind of situation is they go into the basement and they put a shell all around the outside wall, and that shell has the property that the moisture can drip down into a drain channel and be let out of the sump pump. And then they blow insulation against the interior surface of it. So was news to me actually when this was first done in one of our houses, and Seth blithely said that 30% of the heat loss from the typical house is out through the basement walls, and this will put a stop to that. So things that can be done that don't require literally replacing the roof, that will be done. Insulation will be blown into the walls, and the basement, which is badly leaky now, will be corrected and well insulated. So I'm happy to ask Seth to give more detail on that question, which you clearly have the expertise to understand. That's kind of the level at which I understand it at this point.
Yes, what Alex's question leads me to is, are you planning on heat pumps, mini splits, so that there's cooling? I mean, you can't, we kind of can't live without cooling anymore.
Right.
So,
you know, I'd love to say yes to that. It actually, that specific point hasn't come up in the conversations. It's a good point. I will make sure it does come up in subsequent conversations.
okay. Alex?
That, if I may, as you're working through this, as you're moving towards your next drawing set, and as you're moving towards construction drawings, I would be curious to know if there's a way to add, like an add alternate for the project that includes replacing or upgrading existing heat sources to be electric, thinking about future renewable energy projects in town coming online as another tool to encourage and promote affordability over time with what's likely to be a more efficient, affordable way to promote the house or to heat the house.
You're welcome to come to a working group meeting and raise that question. That would be wonderful. The working group meets every other Wednesday. We did not meet this week, so that we're meeting. Well, we're actually doing slightly different timing in November and December than our regular rotation to a schedule around the holidays. the next meeting really will be the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And then we skip a couple of weeks so that we get on a rotation in December that doesn't brought us into Christmas.
Thank you, Linda.
I
We'll
will-
send
I will-
out
I will
notice
send the
about that.
schedule back and you would be
Thank you.
welcome to come and chat with us about it. I better write that one down.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Greg? Greg?
Thanks, Gaston. And I want to speak backwards to a couple comments with just some intel, and then the follow-up question to one of HJ's. So probably there's not a way to merge the lotteries. This project would need to have its own marketing and lottery plan, separate from Amherst Community Homes. However, Valley is already and has been for a while working to coach qualified buyers, some of whom will be above income for this project, some of whom will be closer to it. So there may well be a pool of already coached and qualified folks who won't be able to succeed in getting one of the Amherst community homes, but could end up flowing into this lottery and have been doing some prep for quite some time. Slightly different income level, but there's probably going to be a few folks that end up in that bucket. Local preference, ultimately, EOHLC will have to approve that. This is not a 40B comprehensive permit approach, so they might treat local preference differently than they do with those. Hard to know. But then, to a question, to the sort of the financial model, and TJ was getting at this a bit, and I guess. And I may have missed. I was looking at a detail on the slide, but for resale purposes down the line, right? And I think a lot of these questions, to me, like the rental question, is that what happens when someone moves in with their kids and then their kids leave and then they want a roommate? Like that could be a decade away. But it's good to be thinking about those things now. In a similar vein, taken from some experience of late, I'm curious about. Just ongoing capital investments and the degree to which you're able to project forward. Somebody needs, let's say we put in mini splits, right? Those last 15 years, maybe 20 if we're lucky, right? Someone's got to replace that down the line, or a new oil burner or what have you. A new roof at some point, probably, right? Has ACLT been able to sort of project a rough cost on those in parallel to, I mean, not to, you can never do it in a detailed way, but looking at the sort of an idea of what equity growth might look like on one side and what capital outlays might look like on another, and to confirm that homeowners are sort of keeping up as far as their overall equity. Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd be happy to have your input on it, Jim. I'll give you a minute to think of and share.
So we
Go ahead.
have, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll say briefly, we haven't modeled it, and part of the reason is, I mean, that question about equity, you know, we have a lot of variability between our homes and so, working the Habitat homes are a completely different experience. The
Sure.
new build homes that are deliberately kept quite simple for replacements. So honestly, that's a good question. I would go back to Linda's earlier comment about that's an area where we're still developing our capacities, and that's what one of the areas that the homeowner support group has been looking at. Not so much that analysis, but the support, what support is needed, uh, that would be more informed if we were to do the kind of analysis that you're describing, which I think is something that as we grow we're going to need to do. But generally the broader, what we know is less from research or any analysis we've done, and more based on the CLT model as it's been practiced nationwide. And in general, it has proven effective for homeowners are consistently able to maintain their homes. There's lots of research that's been done showing effectiveness of CLT homeownership to build wealth, the relative success of CLT homes versus open market homes during crises like the in 2008 or and so on. So as a small, relatively young organization, we haven't done that ourselves, and we're relying a lot on sort of the expertise that comes from the networks we're part of. But again, looking to that building out more knowledge and more skills in that area.
Greg,
Thank you.
I want to echo one of the points that Jim raised briefly. Because part of our mission is the maintenance of existing housing stock and the vibrance of existing neighborhoods. The only brand new homes in our inventory are the 2 Habitat houses that we built in North Amherst as our very first project. And the rest are very much luck of the draw. So although everybody that has bought a home in partnership with us is happy with it, in fact, the condition of those homes and their age and the extent to which the routine maintenance has been kept up has been quite different. And we've dealt with them one at a time according to the resources we've had and the needs of those houses at the time people took them on. With quite major attention in some cases and relatively minor in other cases.
And that gets to another, thank you, Linda, a sort of related question. I just want to understand the sort of, I'm trying to think ahead here because I'm currently and frankly engaged in some resales of other non-ACLT properties, but, I'm hoping that your organization might solve for, a more refined model, which is the resale process. Is it your expectation that as when you start getting resources that the plan is for ACLT to repurchase and then resale, or is the idea that it goes right to a new buyer, ideally?
Yeah, well, it's worth just pointing out that in every transaction, there's a few minutes where ACLT owns the whole thing. And that is the purchase is in stages. The seller sells the whole property to us, and the lawyer sitting around the table, it isn't usually typically the real people anymore, it's the lawyers, but immediately the home buyer buys the home, but they buy it from us, not from the seller. We buy the whole property from the seller, and then the home buyer buys the home from us. So legally, there's always a moment in which we own the whole thing. A more practical question, if one of our homeowners is prepared to sell, is how to do that sale in such a way that we don't give away 6% of the value to a real estate agent. That is, we want to be alert to be able to recruit this hasn't happened yet, but we're really trying to build a sense of awareness in the public such that we would have easy access to a pool of suitable buyers should one of our homeowners wish to sell without having to go through a real estate agent. Jim?
Got it. But so you wouldn't need to be liquid though for those 5 minutes where you own the house. Because
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. All right.
And I was just going to add to what Linda said that the ground lease gives us some flexibility where we can step in and exercise an option to purchase if necessary, and then we would need some liquidity to be able to do that. But the most likely practice would be the ideal practice is to work with the homeowner, do the marketing if we can, as Linda says, do it with waiting lists we already have or things like that. But either way, we market in partnership with the homeowner, and then we can just do that simultaneously. Well, it's actually in this case we wouldn't necessarily have to take ownership of the home because we already own the land. The homeowner could sell the home directly to the next homeowner.
Yeah. Bob, you've been waiting patiently for a while with your hand up there.
No, that's all right. This segues a bit from what EJ was saying earlier and some of great comments as well. Joe was mentioning cost. I'm also wondering about sort of capacity for managing the common area once it's a 5-unit complex. Is this something that there would be, what would ACLT's role be in that? Would there be a homeowner association? Who would hold sort of like the master insurance policy? Who would be paying for, common stuff? How would that be managed? And does ACLT have experience or capacity for that sort of thing?
We do not have experience. This would be our first cluster, and we do intend to create a homeowner association. We've begun to do research into existing models. One of the objects is to keep the cost low. I mean, it's typical that people in commercial clusters pay homeowner association fees that are quite substantial and support a staff member and things like that. We don't foresee that happening, but we do foresee that the people in that cluster, people are going to have to understand if they respond to the advertising for this cluster, that they are going to be part of a community that's going to have to make some decisions in common. Do they want to do their own snow plowing? Is there somebody that wants to do the snow plowing, or do instead they want to put up money and hire somebody to come and plow the parking area? Those are practical decisions. The group is going to have to learn to function as a community. So we hope that we start the homeowner selection process sufficiently in advance of the actual closing, then we can begin to build that sense of community and have people begin to at least get to know each other and take up some practical matters like who's going to deal with the snow plowing and that kind of thing. Before we knew we had a wetland, and that put some constraints on a significant number of square feet. Bruce had a design in which every unit had a fairly substantial private yard area. That's going to be harder to do and still maintain the restrictions around maintaining the wetland itself, although you can do things like garden within the 50-foot buffer. But the current setup is going to allow, people can have very modest ornamental plants and stuff. It will finally be laid out with some part of the space private to each homeowner. But some of those decisions still need to be made when the design is really finalized. When we have approval of that site plan, then we're going to have to go back and see where we can really lay out private space for each family and how much common space that leaves that's going to require some kind of regular attention from maintenance.
All right, just a quick follow-up on that. In terms of a master insurance policy for the complex, would that be something that ACLT would initially at least hold, or do you know how that would be handled?
It's a good question. We haven't taken that up. Jim,
Okay.
Do you have any recommendation about that?
I don't. I think we are still looking at different models, homeowner association, possibly a condoization of the 3 units, maybe not including the habitat as well as a homeowners association. So we have, and as Linda said, we haven't done these types of structures before. So we will look for we will get legal guidance on that.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Well, it's been very good that we're kind of kicking the tires to understand the model, see what the issues are, see how the ACLT is planning to address them. Do we have more slides to get a little concreteness on, or is this the presentation for this evening? No. Okay, here we go. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the concept that we're coming forward with. The phases across the top, pre-development, we're not looking at here, but looking at acquisition and redevelopment particularly. And that the total ask to ACLT for acquisition is a grant of $175,000, and for redevelopment, a grant of $100,000. But we're proposing a model. If you just switch to the next slide, Greg, it just puts the highlighting in a different place. These are the same numbers, but we propose a model in which AMAHT consider being our bridge lender. Projects like this always need a bridge lender because the principal source of revenue comes in when they're finished. And so we would like you to consider being our bridge lender. I'll be so bold as to suggest that would have a unique advantage for you, since you're sitting on the cash from that from the Hastings project. You could point to having been a very key element in getting this project off the ground promptly, but a lot of the money would come back to you as soon as it was finished, and you could stake a claim to another big impact that you would have with that money. So the proposal then is for a total of $275,000 in grants, part of which we would want for the acquisition, and part would go toward the construction costs on the redevelopment of the interior. And in addition, $575,000, which would be on a loan basis and would be replaced with very modest interest. This is all conceptual, you understand, at the time that the units were sold. And at this is, although a substantial sum of money, not the total amount needed for redevelopment. So we have as you know, since you've seen some of the documentation of it, an ask into Community Preservation Act Committee for $450,000 for this project. And we also plan an approach to the Amelia Peabody Fund, which likes to see some of the money already committed. So we've skipped a couple of their deadlines. The next one that we would make an ask to them would be April 1st. So the principal sort of big new thought here is that we're asking not just for $275,000 that we don't have to pay back, but we're inviting you to serve as our bridge lender and help us get going a little faster than we would be able to do without that.
Thank you. Linda, did you want to go to the next slide? Is that what you were saying before?
No, that's there in case anybody asks.
Okay.
If we're confident. Yeah, that's a
okay.
backup
Okay.
if somebody wants to ask.
Good.
We expect to earn
The
on
sales prices. Yes.
Why don't you back it up to the slide
Okay.
where they're
So
great. People can look at the model.
let's have some questions about the funding. Linda and I had the conversation about the CPA money. Can we really make a decision before we know that? And we talked about staging our review so that we would be in a position to make a final decision in January after we'll know about the CPA funds. I also shared with Linda my, well, first of all, we've never done this kind of loan. That creates a strong reason for partnering with an institution that does do loans regularly. Greg and I had an initial meeting with the CDFI that funds CLTs. And so we're hopeful to move that conversation forward, in part just to support us with the mechanics of lending, which again is something that we haven't done, and we're not really set up to kind of process and structure this in at least not based on our past experience. But with those comments made, let's hear from our membership, Allegra.
Thank you. I guess I had a few questions, and I think maybe Gaston is pointing to the fact that we might not have answers to some about the lending model, although I do think it's an interesting concept and would be I mean, sticker shock, it was like a big number to see like both those amounts. However, thinking about overall, like our strategic plan that we just put out, one of the items does say supporting 20 homes for ownership. So this, if we funded this project, would get us a quarter of the way towards that goal, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, I guess some of these questions are actually maybe more for Greg, because I hadn't even thought about interest before this came up. And I was wondering if the funds that we have currently are gaining interest, and then if so, how would that be a fair calculation to assess back whatever it is that we are lending, while also being cognizant that it's for a nonprofit. So, Gaston or Greg.
Yes, no, good. That's an excellent question. It's something I've given thought to recently. I went to a conference about public banking in Massachusetts last week. The whole premise of public banking is taxpayer funds are sitting in New York accounts. We should be investing that money in the state. I can talk to you all about that another time, but indeed. So what's happening to these funds? What are they doing right now? Greg or Paul, is that something you can answer?
Yes, I could say that our funds are bearing interest right now. And I honestly couldn't tell you the rate, but the interest balance is not insignificant. It's about $180,000. Allegra, I think I might have sent it to you today. There is some lack of clarity on precisely what's allowable as far as accessing those funds. I think the most likely thing is they're available for development. But I think at the town level, there's just not clarity right now. And because there's a fair amount of money in the development bucket right now, well beyond that, it hasn't been a pressing question. But it's one we could keep exploring. And then I think you were also asking about how would interest work in an outgoing sense, like if it were invested in a project like this. I mean, I think, if we were to participate in a loan, I would assume part of the advantage to that would be a relatively favorable interest rate. And yeah, but I think there'd have to probably be some, but but not a significant amount. Even so, though, we're not talking about a 30-year mortgage here. So the model is, the interest costs, the financing costs are quite separate from, proportionally to what you might think of your own mortgage.
And then I guess in terms of if we are thinking about a grant and a loan, is there any hindrance if we're making two separate decisions about those things? Like say we are deciding, well, and I guess looking at how it's broken down, that we can't do anything if we don't acquire the property, correct? So that, in my mind, the acquisition column is more important than the redevelopment, because if we don't acquire, we don't redevelop. But is there, if there's
No
some phased
redevelopment, no
decision
project.
making that we're going through, is that going to be a hindrance to the overall project? And that's more for
Is that a
Linda.
question for Linda or for
Linda, yeah.
Yeah, there are issues of timing here. One of the motivations for asking a substantial amount from AMAHT for the acquisition and not asking for this for CPA money for the acquisition is that the CPA money is spendable at the earliest on the 1st of July, whereas we're talking about money that AMAHT has in hand now. So there's only the intrinsic limitations of the time it takes to make a decision about how to do it and to decide whether you want to do it or not an artificially imposed 6-month limitation on how soon we can get moving with the acquisition.
Right.
That said, we aren't at this point under any pressure from the family to rush ahead with the acquisition. As I explained to Gaston this afternoon, when we first began this discussion with the Gross family, it was a little over a year ago. It was September of 24. And when they brought forward the idea and just inquired whether we were interested, And one of the things that I said to Demra was that we could do a lot of interesting things, but acting fast was not one of them. And what did the family realize that it could take as much as a year? That's what, when I carried this idea back to the board, the idea was we need at least a year to do enough due diligence to even give an answer about whether we want to take on this project or not. And so that was the answer that we conveyed to the family. Were they comfortable not getting an answer, yes or no, firmly from us as to whether we wanted to proceed for as much as a year? And the answer to that was yes. Well, the year is up, but things aren't sort of go quite so black and white, go, no go. The reality is that Deborah Gross has participated in the working team. So she's been with us every step of the way. And in fact, we've already done, and in some cases paid for a lot of the work. She's paid for some of it for which she needed to be the owner to request the work. But ACLT has in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000 on the table just on the pre-development work so far. So the project is doing its pre-development work. You can't get to an answer that allows you to say yes or no firmly that you're going to go ahead with the project until you've done a lot of the pre-development work. So in that context, Deborah herself suggested, as we were forming the timetable that's up on the slide now, that there was no need to rush to try to get the acquisition done in this year, for example, that we could just go ahead at a reasonable pace to acquire the acquisition funds, and the family was not pushing to sort of hold us to a year from when the conversation started. And she pointed out that if we waited until summer of 26 to do the acquisition, a lot of the things that are uncertain now might be settled. We might already have firm answers on the permitting. And one point I didn't raise with this slide is that we are also going ahead with some private fundraising. People, because they know this project is going on, even though we haven't formally solicited money for it, even from some of our stalwarts who've supported a lot of stuff we've done, people have started to come forward and say, can I give to the 174 Amity project? So I didn't even attempt a number to share tonight, but I feel a pretty high degree of confidence that we're probably going to have some private citizens that want to be players in this game. And again, just the time between now and next summer, we might know a lot more about that. That's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but that's kind of why this timetable is set up the way it is. It's because you have money in hand, and the CPA money, no matter how positive their decision is, still can't be spent until the 1st of July.
Allegra, does that answer your follow-up? Yes.
It does. Well, my follow-up is for you.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm hearing that we're probably not actually voting on this tonight.
Correct.
I
No,
want
we're
to
not
table my
voting for
thoughts.
this. This is as you can tell, there's a lot for us to digest.
Yeah.
And we're gonna, and thankfully the sellers, the owners are gracious in their in the time that they're giving the ACLT. And so it will be very helpful for us to be able to make the final decision when we know where the CPA comes out.
And when does that happen?
Yeah, in December.
Okay. All right, then I don't have anything else for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Allegra. TJ.
I have probably a few too many questions right now. Unfortunately, I'm just gonna try to prioritize a few just to maybe these are more suggestions. So the acquisition, as Allegra says, is kind of not necessarily not necessarily the priority. It's more like it comes first. Nothing happens without the acquisition, but everything is a priority in this, because if none of the funding exists, then the project doesn't complete. We don't have affordable housing, and from a lender's perspective, we don't actually get the money back until the houses sell. Right? Am I understanding this correctly? Okay. The one thing that I'm kind of caught up on is obviously the amount that's being asked. Yes, we do have money, but it is intended to fund not just this project, but a lot of projects, hopefully, or at least we like our mission is to drive as many affordable housing units as possible. This project is mission aligned with the housing trust, so I think it's a very important project. But this is an incredibly large amount to swallow. So that's something that I just wanted to just state outright. It might help to maybe stage our approval in the different phases that you have presented here, maybe acquisition first and then redevelopment. One thing that I'm kind of sensing is that redevelopment is a variable mark here. And perhaps this will give you guys time to get some, or us to get some sort of third-party vetting on the cost estimates, just to be sure on the numbers. Is that something that, like, I just open question to maybe Gaston, Greg, or even
Well,
Lynn? Is there
I mean,
something, a mechanism we can get?
Yeah, I'll kind of share one point here, and Greg will follow. I see a lot of advantages to bringing to the party an institution like a CDFI that is experienced funding CLTs, because they also bring technical assistance. They're supporting the project, and we can kind of ride the coattails of their analysis. And so I don't know whether the time, I don't know about the timings, but Greg and I did meet with a CDFI that thinks this project is right in their sweet spot. And so I'm hoping that we can connect the ACLT with the local enterprise assistance fund, ASAP, to see if we can get that into the conversation, because I feel like it could integrate this all in a very nice way to have an experienced player in the space as a co-pilot.
Okay. And so it's just kind of to my earlier point about maybe staging the decision from a housing trust perspective, are we confident in the number and the acquisition as being sort of like a fixed amount that's not likely to change before we actually have to decide on this?
Then, yes.
Okay. And then the redevelopment is something that, like, obviously construction is very variable, as everybody
Construction
knows.
is variable. In fact, we didn't leave the slide before this one up for long. Back it up a couple slides to where the actual costs are summarized. I should just point out to you that between the time that I distributed the paper version and the time that I made the slides, the total cost went up by $30,000.
Yeah.
That's because we got a little reality check on an earlier estimate on site work.
Yeah.
And we still don't have a firm estimate on site work, but the Bucky Sparkle, who's helping us with that, said that the 30,000 that we had in the budget now for site work, he said it's hard to know where this is going to go until we've really uncovered all the problems, but I think you ought to put 60 rather than 30. So I went in and corrected all the stuff. So if you compare this with the paper version that got circulated, the total there is 469, and the added 30 is in the redevelopment, went from 847 to 877.
Yeah, Linda, I fully sympathize with your this is the joys of project management, isn't it? Just these some surprises. Yeah.
Interestingly, in the transition of for the total cost of redevelopment, the specific estimate of the construction costs actually was very close to the square footage estimate. The person doing both those estimates, the detailed one after we had design specs, and the one that was just based on the square footage of the area and his experience dealing with buildings of this age, is Seth Lawrence Slavas, the president of Wright Builders. And his square footage estimate was astonishingly close to what it came out when he was actually saying, okay, so many 2x4s, so many new windows, so many new doors, so much concrete, and plugging all that into the software that he uses to make estimates. I was amazed by how close that came. But in the meantime, of course, who knows what the tariffs are going to do to the cost of various materials. So yeah, we can, that's one of many reasons why I'm strongly moving toward engaging some of our donors that have the capability to make a real difference, which, and that wasn't part of the original plan for this project, because the political situation has so destabilized costs.
Absolutely. Just maybe a technical question. Is contingency, is there a fixed percentage that you're applying to this estimate here?
Did I actually show you the contingency?
I don't recall, to be honest.
Yeah, a fair amount of, there's contingency in pre-development. There's not contingency in the acquisition, but there's contingency, and then in two different parts of the summed up estimates for redevelopment. The total contingency in that budget is about 10% of the total. It's $154,000. If you pull out all the places where we identify a contingency, they add up to 154,000.
Is that based off of anything, or is that just a nominal number?
Those are, in some cases, they're based on percentages of individual elements. It just turned out that when they were summed up, they were about 10% of the total.
Okay.
And added up to that.
And that's a pretty good standard for how these things generally work.
Yeah, you know, you like to think that the contingencies are, that as you continue to refine the estimates, and they're based more and more on precise design elements rather than conceptual ones. But the one major undefinable element now is how bad prices are going to get as the political situation stays unstable.
Absolutely. And then last point, I realized that there's a CPA aspect to this and a housing trust aspect of this. Fundamentally, these funding sources are actually fairly aligned. In fact, they're pretty much the same from a very base case perspective. I'm just kind of worried about transparency in the fact that the ACLT is asking for funding on redevelopment from both the CPA and the housing trust. Is there a way for us to maybe understand the differentiation of what the funds are being acquisitioned for?
Well, you actually, our proposal to CPAC is a public document.
Yeah.
And so you know what we're asking them for, and they know that we're asking you. And to be candid, it feels peculiar to me that the town has put the resources to which we would legitimately apply. I mean, it arose historically, but the resources are in two different places.
Yeah.
In the very earliest discussion of that, one way to think about it is to say, what's the total amount that we're asking the town to invest in this process? And, you know, there are kind of days when I'd like to just say, why don't you guys to decide how you want to divvy it up?
Trust me, I've asked to
make us decide what should come from AMAHT and what should come from CPA. We want the town to commit a certain fraction of the total. One thing that I didn't include in tonight's slides that I sometimes do include, and I can send it to you, is to get a perspective on what fraction of ACLT's work we're asking you to support. It's a much smaller fraction than the fraction of this project we're asking you to support.
Yeah.
And during the interval that we do this project, we will have acquired a gift of property, land, and home, and $100,000. The house is probably, it's a house on Lincoln Avenue, one of the more modest houses on Lincoln Avenue, but it'll appraise at $500,000 at least. And we are just closing on a property in which ACLT will end up owning a $300,000 interest based on the family selling below market, and $150,000 that we raised. And we are looking at another contribution from one of our members analogous to the one that I talked about where the donor is still resident in the home. Another house on that same block is proposing to follow that model, and we may close on that still this year. Oh, I'm forgetting there are 4 projects. I have Shearing Street, Beston. Oh, this project. This is the 4th project. We have 4 live projects right now. We're not asking you for a nickel for any of the others, and they will add substantial value to our portfolio. And that's just at the beginning. Who knows what we'll get over the 3 years that this unfolds. So you're not being asked for anywhere near the cost of our work as it appears from the fraction of this project we're asking you to weigh in on. This lends itself to public funding because of its scale.
Good. And another way to put this, Linda, that I think you also endorse is that this is the beginning of a long and beautiful relationship between the trust and the ACLT. We're going to be supporting each other perpetually. This is the project where you need our assistance, but we are cheerleaders for all your work. Alex.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment and speak in very strong favor of this project and to thank Linda and the entire board for their work on this. Allegra pointed out how closely this aligns with our internal goals from our action plan, and I want to highlight that. I'd love to highlight that these are ownership units that will be affordable for low and moderate income families in perpetuity. I know that for some of our newer members, this might feel like a lot of money to put in one place. I will tell everybody that I was pleasantly surprised with how low this ask was. I was actually expecting a much higher number, but this is an incredibly experienced team that ACLT has put together. This is a wonderful location for a project. We just received like substantial contributions from an in lieu from our inclusionary zoning process. This is so close to where that project is. Like if we're thinking about near site affordable housing development, this is it. This is at a size project that the town has expressed support for. It's like in this missing middle housing scale. It's bedroom and unit counts that the town is desperately in need of. It is walkable and busable to a grocery store, to downtown, to places of employment. I also want to highlight that part of why we exist as a trust and part of what I've always viewed as our strength is our flexibility to pursue things and cover gaps that are hard to cover, including this pre-development work, including this bridge loan. I know that we have a little bit of homework on our end as we think about how to structure that in a way that's sustainable and works for this project and sets a precedent moving forward. I am going to ask and encourage our chair and our staff support here to really think about making this as soft of debt as possible. There are several affordable housing projects and home loan banks out there that offer 0 or near 0 interest loans. I would love to see us move closer to that direction with this. And just to remember that this is, for us, a one-time expenditure that is going to enable affordable homeownership in town for 5 households forever. And we don't see opportunities like that very much. So many state projects have basically a sunset period on their affordability restrictions. This is such a unique strength of the land trust model. And to know that this is investment in our community in a way that's so aligned with our goals. I just wanted to call that out and ask that of our chair and our staff support as we think through what this lending could look like. I'd also like to encourage us to move as quickly as we can on this. We all know from experience that once you start having monies committed to projects, it strengthens your other grant applications and your other asks. And it helps make projects much more real for people, and it helps bring down ultimate construction costs because the earlier you can engage in contracts, the earlier you can get GMPs that are set. So I would encourage us all to support this, to move quickly and to think about making this as soft of debt as possible. Also, as we're thinking about whatever this final agreement looks like with ACLT. I would love for us to keep the door open to think about further contributions to this project as it develops, particularly thinking about those very small extra things we can do to increase livability and affordability in alignment with our goals, thinking mostly about, as I said, conversion of heat fuel systems into electric systems. And I do hope that you share your working session schedule, Linda, because I would love to go to that. But I would love us to think about that as well and think about if there are other contributions we as a trust would be willing to make to take that project, this extra step to take it from already a great, strong project, in my opinion, to a really fantastic project that we can point to for the rest of time as a strong example of what our model can do.
Thank you for that framing and reminding us about what's important, Alex. Greg, maybe you take the final questions here so we can spend a few minutes on our committees before we close tonight.
Sure. I just want to follow with a couple details, actually. Just speaking to contingency, escalation, et cetera. It seems to me that time here is in our favor cost escalation wise, in the sense that there is no state funding queue that this project would need to wait in, unlike a lot of what else we do, which often results in, very significant inflation escalators. I think that would be greatly mitigated here. I just wanted to note that. And then also, this is a rehab project, and not, well, the 60% of it is rehab, which can present unpredictable things related to contingency, but I would think probably less unpredictable stuff as far as materials. For example, Valley Community Homes, 8 tariff costs a lot, right? This probably less so, because we're not building from the ground up brand new with every single piece getting tariffed, basically. There'd be some new materials, obviously, but proportionately less, I think. So the concern around tariffs, sort of national political environment, that kind of thing, to me, that's somewhat mitigated by both the shorter timeline and the rehab. That was my point.
Okay, so Linda and Jim, do you want to make a very brief final word before we thank you for your presence?
Yeah, do you want to go first?
I don't have anything other than thanking you all for so much time to be able to and so much interest in this project.
Okay.
Yeah. I would echo Jim's thought that I really appreciate the amount of time, and not only the whole committee has spent, but Greg and Gaston have individually, or the two of them together, spent a lot of time helping us to prepare for this meeting. So I'm very grateful for that. And Alex, I'm particularly grateful for your full-hearted support of the project. That's very encouraging. And just very briefly, let me say the whole experience of being part of ACLT from its beginning, and particularly the flowering of the last 2 or 3 years, I've just been blown away by the generosity of the people of Amherst. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property have been put in our hands, and people just cheerfully walk away from $200,000 worth of value in their property because they feel the commitment to the stabilization of neighborhoods and to affordable housing. So it really is a pleasure to be part of this.
All right. Well, here, and to be continued. Thank you. We'll keep at it. We'll send out the working group information as if Alex didn't have enough meetings. We're grateful for his appetite.
Yeah, I just want you to notice, Gaston, that Maura popped in. She's been sitting patiently through this. Maura is the clerk of ACLT. and also one of the editors of the Amherst Indy, which has covered our work nicely over the years. And
yes, of course,
we're getting covered both in the Indy and the current pieces.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you for your time. We're going to do a little internal housekeeping in our last 15 minutes.
Can I just invite you all to our annual meeting on December 7th at UMass at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? That's a Sunday. It's in the Honors College at UMass. And we'll be sending out an invitation. I'll send it through Greg, but he'll forward it all to you, December 7th.
All righty.
We'll be celebrating our success with 61 Fearing. That'll be a highlight of that meeting besides the business meeting.
Excellent. Well, thank you for stopping in, Maura, and thank you all. So we'll see you probably at our next meeting.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've kept our good record of keeping to our time, a privilege other town committees don't have. I think the real agenda item is just to hear from the beginning of the subcommittee work, and also Allegra, your work organizing events, so we can just kind of do a round robin for anybody who has any updates. Bob, Greg, and I met earlier this week, and we can share some updates. But who else would like to start? And just any updates that you have to share.
I can go,
Okay.
it's quick.
Go ahead, Allegra.
So I have been in touch with the Donahue Institute and various housing groups around the Hampshire County. The Donahue Institute was actually planning to have county-wide listening sessions about their report that they put out. So we are in talks about whether it makes sense to have an additional presentation in Amherst, because it is a regionally based report. But I do hope that once they have set the date for that, we are at the very least invited to participate in it. Because I know that they were scheduling their Pittsfield one like the week that I had reached out to them, or it was on the schedule. So I will keep everyone updated as I hear more.
Okay, and that reminds me, in terms of events, there, Paul, you're going to be meeting with our new town planner at a Cup of Joe, a Friday Cup of Joe coming up. Is that?
Yeah, no, this Friday it's Sean McGowan, our new finance director. Then in December, it'll be our new planning and economic development director, Jeff Bagg.
Okay. All right. So that December 1, I'm going to try to be there. It's certainly close to the work that we're doing.
Good.
So for Bob, Greg, and I met for this kind of ecosystem innovation initiative. Part of what we're looking at is the extent to which affordable housing trusts in Massachusetts have been using calls for proposal. Turns out fair amount of precedents that we have for consultants, program managers, equity for larger projects, pre-development funding, feasibility studies, funding specific projects. So we're gonna just kind of follow through and figure out what bearing the state procurement and bidding laws may have on the framing of calls for proposal. But we're going to see if we can create some basic structure that we can use not only for the ecosystem in innovation initiatives, but maybe also just for the bread and butter of the funding that we've done historically. Maybe it would be helpful to actually announce to the world, this is the kind of project proposal that we're looking for, even though some of the established players know how to come to us already. So that is, I guess, part of the update I'd like to give. Bob?
Sure. So we also looked at some financing programs offered through trusts, and also specific to ADUs as well, to see other examples. The City of Boston has, in terms of ADU, has technical assistance grants for designing and permitting, small, and also 0% loan financing for owners up to 50,000. So that was one interesting model, and they have a good portal site. There's a group called Renofi, which is a sort of a consortium of lenders, it seems. And one of the things that was interesting with them was that they had pre-approved ADU designs. As an example, they're active mostly on the West Coast, but also Washington, D.C., but open to exploring, developing this sort of resource in other markets. CDAC was another one that is let's see, Community Economic Development and Assistance Corporation, and they have a home modification for ADUs. It's really focused on accessibility. So for instance, ramps and that sort of thing. And the scenario there would be where the homeowner is either staying in the main home or moving into an ADU, but they have financing as well. So there are a number of different examples like this that we're looking into more, and some of those sort of crossed over with the RFPs as well. I think Worcester was one community that was a good model. Somerville was another one. So more research to do in that area, but encouraging.
Greg, what you want to pick up from there? Maybe you can tell folks about the mints that we've learned about.
I'm sure, kind of another thread of research, which isn't really started yet, but just an idea that we learned about. I think via chatting with that CDFI, but are something called a mixed income neighborhood trust, which is a sort of designed as a bigger vehicle to pop sort of scattered sites into. So kind of, there's a few emerging models out there around creative ownership. The CLT is sort of tickling that in their own way. But a mint is maybe even a more sophisticated version of it. But
all right. Well, we want to try to get the other two subcommittees in motion. So Greg and I will follow up offline to try to get those meetings happening, so we can begin to kind of formulate the mandate for those efforts. And I guess at this point, take any questions. Anyone want to reflect on the process of hearing about the ACLT's proposal? Welcome that, or other ideas. Alex, please.
One thing that is not related to what we talked about today, but a request for a future agenda item. Greg and Gaston, I'd be very curious if we could invite folks or a representative from some of the co-housing communities in town,
Okay.
To come speak to us as we think about kind of this development ecosystem and alternative housing model piece. I think that that's something that is not unique to Amherst, but unique that we have so many residents living in co-housing, and I'd love to hear more about as we think about this. Yeah.
Good. I have some contacts, so that's a great idea. And Greg, can you make a note in the master checklist? Excellent. Allegra?
I guess my question, I think this will probably be like an ongoing conversation as we talk more about different development, but just making sure that we're not losing sight of affordability. I mean, I feel like there's all sorts of great ideas, but I just want to make sure that if we're putting out proposals for ADUs or something, that there's going to be, can we have an affordability restriction, or is, how do we bake that into whatever it is that we're doing?
Precisely. I think that would be the predicate for our funding, would be to get there. So there's more work to do, but part of what Bob was looking into was, can we find other funders so that between the two of our contributions, we can get to the affordability level that we'd like to get to. EJ.
Yeah, it just remind me when we were expecting to actually decide on the 174 Amity project.
I'd like to see if we can do that in January, after we have the number from the CPA, and hopefully we can make some headway on some of the other paths that were discussed this evening.
And are we going to delay the decision if we don't get those numbers?
I mean, this is all you know, very very fluid.
Right.
So you know, you can you want to kind of verbalize your thinking a little more behind the question, just to put on the table.
I think again, I'm not saying that the project is bad or anything like that, or I'm against the project. It's just I think it's our due diligence that we have to do before we spend money to understand the numbers behind the numbers. So just something that I would
Yes.
love to have as much information as possible.
Yes, and just to kind of I've already said it, but to show my own cards explicitly, that's why I'd really love to get a CDFI who's done this before.
Yeah.
Kind of leading the charge. And one piece that we got from the CDFI is their checklist of what they want from a CLT before they fund. We shared that with Linda. She appreciated it, has almost all of those items ready. So I hear your point, and that's the step that I'm pushing to help with your concern.
Okay. The second point is more of like getting on my soapbox. Linda kind of made a allusion to it, but the fact that our money, we apply for CPA funding and then it gets kind of basically cycled back through in this dual format it is an awkward part of our town. I don't think we can do anything about it. I understand it's part of our system, but I do want to echo that, like, this is probably going to come up in future projects and probably has come up in my guess.
Yeah, and I'd love Paul's feedback here. I mean, one, as you know, Jay, you know, I was wondering in the conversation with Greg as we prepared our CPA application, how to differentiate our respective competencies,
right,
and legitimacies, the CPA versus the trust, and to what extent should that bear on which of us is giving money for what. You know, I don't have concrete answers, but I wonder, Paul, if you have any reflections or comments, whether on the history or form and function here.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be very quick. So the CPA is a totally different process. It's a, you know, different funding sources, taxpayer money. They will make a recommendation in December, then it goes to the town council. They're the actually appropriating authority, it goes directly to the town council. So that won't happen probably till March. So there won't be a real decision for sure on CPA till then. I think the concern I have is, so for this project, I'd be interested in seeing if they have a pro forma or anything like that that's up and running. Maybe you have it already, but that's something I think we should share out. And then I think that what I'm sort of getting concerned about with the trust is that people are coming, the trust has money, people are coming to us like a granting agency, and it feels like we're not we're not driving, we're sort of like doling out, and every project that comes to us is really compelling and wonderful. And maybe our job isn't to sort of help. I think the trust ought to be driving things instead of just sort of waiting and writing checks. So I'm getting concerned because that's been our pattern over the last few years.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. And I see the articulation of calls for proposal as a vehicle for getting some clarity about the buckets and what we want to do with them, and getting more proactive about generating the kinds of proposals that we're looking for. So I feel that concern as well. That we don't have policy direction. Alex.
That's actually similar to what I was going to bring up. So thank you, Paul and Gaston, for that. I know since I've joined the trust, we've engaged with the conversation several times about our own standards for deciding funding and whether that is on a scheduled basis, whether that's as it comes to us, and have had some discussion and seemingly never landed somewhere completely concrete on that. And when we've reached agreement verbally, it's never been written down. And as we continue to see larger amounts, hopefully in the future, flowing through the trust, I do think that's important. So as we're moving through this project in particular, I think that this is more an invitation for all of us to be thinking a lot about what we want to see in terms of standards and how prescriptive we want to get. What I don't know and what I would love an answer from Paul or Greg on, and it doesn't need to be today, but thinking about as we move towards actually setting some standards and procedures ourselves, how we best do that. If that's an appropriate request of town staff that we ask to come back to us, if that's something that we should pass to one of our committees, I don't know the best way to move forward with that while complying with open meeting law. So I'd love some advice and guidance on that. But especially now that we have a clear action plan and we're about to see hopefully the adoption of a housing production plan by the town that we've supported. I'd love to see us start to actually take this opportunity and be decisive and, in Paul's metaphor, start driving a little bit.
Good. Point well taken, Allegra.
I guess two things. And one is I do think that there, even if we're not saying, hey, we want this right now, like we did set our strategic plan, which does outline again that we want to build at least 20 homeownership opportunities. And I've, again,
Yes.
so we don't always have control over when other entities have the ability or potential to develop something. So I do think that in a sense that's, these things pop up and it's like, oh, that's great. And I
Good.
understand
So-
that that
so-
might not be sustainable long term, but I also do think when there are big projects in front of us that have again, a potential for affordability and perpetuity, those are important to take. And I guess my question would also be, what would there be any benefit in us at least having a conversation next month about the grant portion that they are asking about, so that the 275 is separately considered from the 575 loan? Because then if we are saying, you know what, we're not going to do the loan, we don't feel like we're set up for that model, we've set you up with the place that can do that, but having that chunk from us would allow them to say, hey, in hand, we already have this, and that gives them, again, the leverage to get that additional funding. I think that that's important, and that also that would show CPA some, faith from us as the trust. And I do think that, like, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but the community homes project also received money from both us and the CPA. And we as the trust gave them almost the amount that the ACLT is asking for right now, and that was all a grant, not a loan. So I do think it is a big number, but looking at the cost per unit for those 3 units that they are developing, not Habitat is developing, I don't think that that's actually that much money compared to what the new construction of an Amherst Community Homes cost per development or per unit. And it's not that much more than what we were hearing an ADU might cost per unit over the summer. And I don't have that number in my head, but I think I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that 400,000 was like what they were anticipating per unit. I think that's, in this economy with materials as they are, I think that's actually quite reasonable. So that would be my plug. And I'm going to stop talking.
Good. It's helpful for you to point out that difference, Allegra. The place where I am still not stuck, but where my mind goes is that I don't feel like we've done the diligence on the whole of the project, and I don't feel comfortable saying, okay, here's 300 grand to put towards the purchase if we haven't gotten fully comfortable with where the project's going to end up. Like, if we're going to put any money towards this project, we need to have kind of felt that we're ready to sign off on it. And I don't personally feel ready for that yet. It seems to me that giving money to purchase the building is part of blessing the whole project, the construction, the renovation, the vision for sale, the whole of it. That's how it's going through my brain. I don't know if you have a comment to that. or if that's consistent with what you're saying.
I mean, I feel that looking at the team that they've put together, I mean, Wright Construction is really a well-respected firm, and I think that they have a great range of experience in addressing the different aspects. I mean, I have a lot of respect for the community land trust model myself, and I do think that they have done nothing like this yet, and they are very transparent about that. But I do think that their model has been successful for other homeowners, both purchasing and then staying in to, gift the property after they are no longer here. So, I mean, I think
Yes.
I'm
Greg, do
not
we
as
have
nitpicky
confirmation
about the
about Wright?
details of the construction, I guess, in terms of like if they're going to have tin ceilings or not. But I think that this is
Wright
much more of
Builders
a proposal than
contracted?
we've seen from some other things that we've given money to. So I know we're not like voting on this today, and I think that, it seems like there's a lot to unpack that we might not have time for, given that we're over time, but
Yes. Greg.
Yeah, I just want to say, so as of the most recent materials, we've noted that Seth of Wright Builders has agreed to oversee the hiring of a qualified construction supervisor. So we don't have Wright Builders officially on the project yet, or perhaps at all. We don't have clarity there. And then just a couple other clarifications. So one, I think it makes there's probably a very healthy process at some point in our deliberations of separately considering the loan versus the investment. Not necessarily that they have to be on different timelines, but I think they are kind of discrete things. But I'll say too, there might not be a timing issue there, in that perhaps those things could happen simultaneously. I think we've begun to understand this project as acquisition needing to happen well before redevelopment. It doesn't necessarily need to work that way. Like, things could all close at once, and the investments could be happening simultaneously. I'm not sure if ACLT can facilitate that or not, but perhaps they could. I also want to note time. We do want to make sure we do public comment, and I know Ruby's with us as well and has her hand up.
All right. So yeah, Alex, if you can keep it as brief as possible.
Yeah, really quickly, I agree with everything Allegra said. I support us moving quickly on this, and I also personally am a big advocate of the ACLT model. So, Greg, I hear what you're saying, that there doesn't necessarily need to be a separate timeline for moving one versus the other, but I agree with everything Allegra said. Another thing to think about for the future, and maybe this is something to request of the town manager and of Greg. We've mentioned it before, but I know that recently the town council received a big update on Hickory Ridge and kind of what's next with that site. It's something we've talked about before, and as a trust have expressed support for at least thinking about affordable housing on that site. Back to this theme of thinking of how we can drive a little bit as we start to flesh out our own standards. I'd love to have a discussion with the town and with town staff to see if there are ways we can proactively support that process. From what I understand, the town is either looking for or about to be looking for a consultant to move forward with the project of gathering community input and thinking about final product. Paul, please correct me if you're at a different point in that. Okay, but I would love for us to think about ways we can support the town and maybe request an update from our planning department or town manager to think about if there are ways we can contribute to that as well.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So it's been 2 hours. We haven't heard from you, Carla or Rob. I don't know if you want to give us one sentence just so we hear your voice this evening.
I mean, I'm more of a soaker. A lot of my questions that I had were answered, but I share a lot of people's feelings about how I agree that this is a really worthwhile project, and I'm still getting a sense of how it would fit into the greater scope of what we have done, what we want to do. And I also kind of agree with what I'm glad that I do feel like so far a lot of things we've talked about have been more reactive, and I'm kind of looking for, as Paul was talking about, kind of being more proactive in looking forward. But I know those are big questions and big ideas. But yeah, overall, I mean, I think it's a great project, and even when you think about it, it's the amount that we would be giving divided by 5 even makes it more, I think, more attractive, because it's not just for one place. But again, I'm still trying to figure out how all these things fit into yeah, just the history of what we've done and what we're planning to do. But I also appreciate Allegra saying that it's, we have some very clear goals, and one of them is to support 20 houses, and this would be an amazing way to work towards that. So nothing earth shattering, but yeah. And Rob and I have we're planning next week to kind of get together for one of the subcommittees with regards to the rapid response, and so we're a little bit behind, but yes, it is on our calendars. So
yeah, glad you're getting started.
Yep.
Rob, any what reactions can you share?
Yeah, and to I guess to keep it brief, echoing Carla's comments, I think that with what we're trying to achieve as a trust and what this project entails, I think it checks almost all of the boxes. For the specifics of like due diligence, that's what I'm thinking that I need to spend more time on myself to really understand those logistics. But for me, it's, the location is fantastic. It's, exactly what we're looking to sort of support as a trust from, the outside looking in. So my scope on this is I'm very excited about potentially working with this organization to, help where we can. But similarly, I think for me in particular, taking more time to really understand the nuances of what this actually means, what the ripple effects could be from this. To me, it seems all positive, but again, being fairly new to this space, there's obviously a lot that I don't know. So taking that time, I think, is going to be important to making the right decision. So I'm happy to be doing that, and then for us to continue this conversation at another time as well.
Excellent. And so Ruby, you've been with us in the background. Do you want to? Oh, you do have a hand. So let's promote you, and you can be our closer.
Hello.
Hi.
So my comments are actually not to do with what you discussed tonight, although it's very interesting and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to go through it. I just wanted to flag really quickly that at the State House and also virtually next week, there's a couple hearings that might be of interest. Specifically, the Joint Committee on Housing is meeting next week. And one of the a couple of the bills that they're talking about do have to do with that rent control and rent stabilization. I know that's been of interest to people in the past. So that one is on Wednesday, November 19th. If you're interested in submitting testimony, you can do that by sending an email written testimony, or you can speak at the hearing either virtually or in person. There's also a hearing the following day or the day before for the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities that has a couple housing related bills as well. Those are more focused on emergency housing, but they do look into, I know at least one of them is focused on a study of the causes of homelessness, and specifically, I believe, related to women's homelessness. But yeah, that's the quick update on my end. And yeah, thank you again. If you're interested in providing testimony, please feel free to let us know. Happy to help facilitate.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here, Ruby, and for sharing that information. Thanks everybody for your patience going 15 minutes over. Good meeting. We processed a lot of very important information, so I appreciate your patience. Have a good night.